Sing unto Yahweh, let all the earth call. Bless his name and show forth his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory amongst the...
Subscribe and check out our playlist and our videos on our channel, as well as our shorts. We go into a deep dive into things, and a lot of you guys are not watching the whole entire videos. I don't know if it's because you don't understand, and if that's the case, let me know in the comments, or if it's just because you don't agree with it. And even if you don't agree with it, still let me know in the comments what you don't agree with and why, etc. But subscribe to the channel, check out our videos. We'll be having more videos uploaded. We have a bunch of shorts uploaded as well that dives into the language. And then again, we have our playlist and textual criticisms, the shorts, the Shabbat teachings, and destroying Christ in the Old Testaments, false doctrines, our lessons, and our book readings. Okay, we read out different books. All right, so subscribe to the channel, make sure you share, and let's start correcting some of these erroneous doctrines that are in Israel. Okay. Shalom, shalom. Amishbaka. Today we're going to talk about Lectionis, Matrix Lectionis is what I like to call it. Matrix Lectionis, what it is, and we're going to go over the book, Hebrew Epipigraphs. Where is it? Yes, right here. I'm going to go over this book, read a little bit of this book, Hebrew Epipigraphs, etc. We're going to read some of the study. And this book here is in the book of, the library of University. Is this book right here, Matrix Lectionis and Ancient Hebrew Epigraphs. All right, University of Michigan libraries. Okay, University of Michigan libraries. This is the original from the University of Michigan, etc. But first, we're going to read what Matrix Lectionis is. Okay. So, and the title of the book is Matrix Lectionis and Ancient Hebrew Epigraphs. But first, what is Matrix Lectionis? Matrix Lectionis is Latin for mother of reading, okay, or Matrix Lectionis. Original Hebrew is any consonant letter that is used to indicate a vowel, and we call those gutturals, okay. Primarily in the writing of Semitic languages such as Arabic, Hebrew, and Syriac. Okay, that's Aramaic. The letters that do this in Hebrew are Aleph, He, Vav, and Yod. Okay, Aleph, He, Vav, Yod. With the latter two in particular being more often vowels than they are consonants. So Vav and Yod most times are consonants than they are vowels. Okay, and that's why you see people that they can't really just read the Dead Sea Scrolls or the what they call Paleo Hebrew, because they don't know this. With the latter two in particular being more often vowels than they are consonants. In Arabic, the Matrix Lectionis, though they are much less often referred to as thus, are Aleph, Wav, and Yah. Right? And it shows you the writing. The original value of Matrix Lectionis corresponds closely to what are called modern linguistics glides or semi-vowels. Because the scripts used to write some Semitic languages lack vowel letters, ambiguous reading of a text might be difficult. Therefore, to indicate vowels, mostly long, consonant letters are used. For example, in the Hebrew construct state form bet, meaning the house of, the middle letter in the spelling bet, this is, like you say, you have the bet, the yod, and the tav. acts as vowels, right? But in the corresponding absolute state from Bayit, house, which is spelled the same letter represents a genuine consonant, right? That yod, bet and Bayit. Two different meanings derived from the same word. The same letter represents a genuine consonant. Matrix Lectionis are extensively employed only in Hebrew, Aramaic, Syriac, and Arabic. But the phenomenon is also found in Ugaritic, Moabite, South Arabian, and Phoenician alphabets. Isn't that what the Paleo Hebrew come from? Phoenician, right? First millennium BC, etc. Now, historically, the practice of using matrix Lectionis seems to have originated when the Aj and the Ah diphthongs, written with the Yod and the Vav consonant letters respectively, monophthongized to simple long vowels. What does that word mean? It is a sound change by which a diphthong becomes a monophthong, a type of vowel shift. It is also known as ungliding, as diphthongs are also known as gliding vowels. In languages that have undergone monophthongization, diphgraphs that formally represent diphthongs. Okay. This epiphenomenal association between consonant letters and vowel sounds was then seized upon and used in words without historic diphthongs. In general terms, it is observable that early Phoenician texts have very few matrix Lectionis, right? So very few, but it's there. And that during most of the first millennium BCE, Hebrew and Aramaic were quicker. Hebrew and Aramaic, right? First millennium BCE, Hebrew and Aramaic were quicker to develop matrix Lectionis than Phoenician. However, its latest period of development in North Africa, referred to as the Punic, Phoenicians developed a very full use of matrix Lectionis, including the use of the letter ayin, also used for this purpose much later in the Yiddish orthography. Okay, so and the difference between Yiddish and Hebrew is the sentence structure of the words. Okay, Hebrew is verb, subject, object, and Yiddish is more like English, subject, object, verb. Okay, so that's how you tell the difference. In pre-exilic Hebrew, there was a significant development of the use of the letter he to indicate word vowel sounds other than I and you. This was probably inspired by the phonological change of the third person singular possessive suffix ahu and o in most environments. However, in later periods of Hebrew, the orthography was changed so word final o was no longer written with a he, except in a few archaical spelled proper names such as Solomon, which is Solomon right here, as you see right here. And it really is Shlomo. And Shiloh, you see it right here, Shiloh. The Che is the H, but right here is Solomon, but it's Che. Okay, it should be Shlomo. The He should be silent. The difference between the spelling of the third person singular possessive suffix is attached to singular nouns with a He in early Hebrew versus with a Vav in later Hebrew has become an issue in the authentication of the Yoash inscription. Right, so the Yoash inscription from Yoash, king of Israel. Okay, so it's saying that the third person singular possessive suffix at the end of something is making it a problem in authenticating the Yoash inscription. Okay, because in the early period they used the he as a singular possessive suffix, but then it switched to the vav. Okay. According to Sass, already in the Middle Kingdom, there were some cases of matrix Lectionis, consonant graphemes, which were used to transcribe vowels into foreign words, namely Punic, Aramaic, and Hebrew. Sometimes even Aleph, Nave, notes that the earliest Aramaic and Hebrew documents already used matrix Lectionis. The earliest Aramaic and Hebrew documents. Some scholars argue that the Greeks must therefore have borrowed their alphabet from the Aramaeans. However, the practice has older roots and is the Semitic cuneiform alphabet of Ugaritic. 13th century BC already had matrix Lectionis. Okay, so 13th century. So the Hebrew came from Ugrit, and the Aramaeans and Phoenicians and all that stuff came from Ugrit. And they had a form of it, and it already had matrix Lectionis in it. The earliest method of indicating some vowels in Hebrew writing was to use the consonant letters Yod, Vav, He, Aleph of the Hebrew alphabet to also write long vowels in some cases. Originally, Aleph and He were only used as matrix Lectionis at the end of words, and Yod and Vav were used mainly to write the original diphthongs. So what's a diphthong? A diphthong is also known as a gliding vowel or a vowel glide. It's a combination of two adjacent vowel sounds within the same syllable. Technically, a diphthong is a vowel with two different targets. That is, the tongue moves with the pronunciation of the vowel. All right, so that's what a diphthong is. So mainly to write the original diphthongs of, aj, as well as whatever that is, surrounded by two vowels, which sometimes simplified to plain long vowels. Gradually, as it was found to be insignificant for differentiating between similar nouns, and I and vav were also inserted to mark some long vowels of non-diphthongal origin. If words can be written with or without matrix Lectionis, spellings that include the letters are called male Hebrew in Hebrew, or pleni in Latin, meaning full, and spellings without them are called haser or defective. In some verb forms, matrix Lectionis are almost always used. Around the 9th century CE, it was decided that the system of matrix Lectionis did not suffice to indicate the vowels precisely enough for purposes of liturgical recitation of biblical texts. So a supplemental vowel pointing system, the Nakud, which everybody say, oh, it's Jewish, it comes from the Bible. Okay, well, whatever. It is an upgrade of matrix Lectionis, which matrix Lectionis they was using since King David times, and we're going to prove that with that book. Nakud, diacritic symbols indicating vowel pronunciation and other important phonological features not written by the traditional basic consonantal orthography, joined matrix Lectionis as part of the Hebrew writing system. In some words in Hebrew, there is a choice of whether to use matrix Lectionis or not. And in modern printed text, matrix Lectionis are sometimes used even for short vowels, which is considered to be grammatically incorrect according to traditional norms, though instances are found as far back as Talmudic times. All right. Such texts from Judea and Galilee were noticeably more inclined to male spellings than texts from Babylonia. Similarly, in the Middle Ages, the Ashkenazi Jews tended to use male spellings under the influence of European language, but Sephardi Jews tended to use Haser spellings under the influence of Arabic. Most commonly, Yod indicates I or E, while Vav indicates O or U. Aleph was not systematically developed as matrix Lectionis in Hebrew, unlike in Aramaic and Arabic, but it is occasionally used to indicate a vowel. However, a silent Aleph indicated an original glottal stop, that's why I say consonant sound that has become silent in some contexts in Hebrew pronunciation can occur after almost any vowel at the end of a word. He can also be used to indicate that the vowel A or E should be pronounced. Okay, and this is what it's saying right here. In biblical, the Yod, modern is Yod. Aleph, Vav, or Wa, or Vav. Biblical is Wav. Modern is Vav. Okay, and the He stays the same. So the Wav, you know what I mean? When you see that dot on top, it becomes an O. When you see the dot underneath, it's a U. It's a U. Okay, Aleph is silent, or it could be E or A, depending on the syntax. And the Yod is a I or E, depending on the grammar. Okay, depending on the cool what it says. Now let's get into this book right here. Okay, again, the name of this book is called Matrix Lectionis in Ancient Hebrew Epigraphs by Zioni Zavit. Okay. Let's see here. This is from American Schools of Oriental Research. No, they keep calling that the Orient. copyright 1980. Right? In memory of his grandfather. Version 2. We're going to skip the preface. Go down to chapter 1. Ever since the pioneering studies of Wilhelm Lectionis in 1837 attempted to apply data derived from Phoenician inscriptions to questions posed by the inconsistent orthography of the Hebrew Bible, scholars have returned periodically to investigate the problem anew. The objective of these investigations have been to describe how, when, and why the graphemes Aleph, He, Wav, and Yod came to be used as vowel indicators in addition to their use as consonant indicators. Although some medieval Jewish scholars had already speculated the employment of these four graphemes as matrix Lectionis. All right, and it'll be like this right here hereafter. To be a late development in Hebrew orthography. It was only with the discovery and study of Phoenician, Moabite, Aramaic, and Hebrew inscriptions from Syria, Palestine, that scientific inquiry could begin. The flurry of archaeological work in Palestine in the early decades of this century unearthed a fund of materials inscribed in Hebrew. When combined with inscriptions known from the 19th century, these discoveries were made possible a new synthesis of data. In 1944, Albright wrote, "It is clear that no metrics Lectionis were written, at least in the older poems of the Pentateuch, either in medieval or in final position. No special proof is needed for the omission of vowel letters in medieval position, since it is regular in all early Hebrew and all Phoenician inscriptions. In Aramaic documents, it was customary until the 7th century BC." Okay. The actual presentation of the synthesis upon which Albright based his conclusion was made by the two students, F.M. Cross, D.N. Friedman, in their monograph Early Hebrew Orthography. In 1952, under the guidance of Albright, they investigated anew the evolution of Hebrew orthography in the biblical period, working under the assumption that orthographic patterns followed rigid laws and, like phonetic principles, can be classified historically. They elevated the relevant data, collecting evidence which could shed light on the origin of the use of graphemes to indicate vowels. Cross and Friedman concluded that Northwest Semitic orthography was originally pure consonantal and is represented as such in the Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions, Ugaritic, Phoenician, and 10th century Hebrew inscriptions. During the 11th and 10th centuries BCE, the Aramaeans, who borrowed the alphabet from the Phoenicians, invented the use of vowel letters to indicate vowels. Yod for I, Vav for U, and He for A and E sounds. Right? So in the 10th, 11th, and 10th centuries BCE, that's 1100 BCE and 1000 BCE. These final metrics Lectionis was transmitted to the Hebrews and Moabites, who employed them from the 9th century. Right? So that's King David, that's First Temple times, 900 BCE. The extensions of the use of metrics Lectionis to indicate medial vowels began in Aramaic during the 8th and 7th centuries and may have spread to Hebrew by the 6th century. These conclusions have significant implications for the text criticisms and interpretation of those parts of the Hebrew Bible which were composed in the pre-exilic period. Continuing the programmatic work initiated by Albright, the oracles of Balaam, Cross and Friedman applied the results to Judges 5, 2 Samuel 1, 20-26, Exodus 15, Genesis 49, Deuteronomy 33, 2 Samuel 22, which they argued were to be dated between the 12th and 8th centuries BCE. In the second of their two joint dissertations, Studies in Ancient Yahwistic Poetry, each poem was subjected to a detailed orthographic analysis, which involved restoration of the text to the orthography, and orthography just means to the writing style of the. It means the like block script, paleo, etc. of the period in which it was composed, and then to a specialized linguistic analysis, which involved applying knowledge of the linguistic structure and vocabulary. poetic style, and metrical forms of the Ugaritic text to these poems. What was involved specifically in their linguistic analysis was more than just an explanation and explication of the biblical text in the light of Ugaritic. It implied restoration of the text according to the more ancient models. Their method of linguistic analysis lies beyond the scope of this study, but their method of orthographic analysis is certain germane. By demonstrating the late origin of metrics Lectionis, Cross and Freeman implied that the removal from certain texts need not be classified as conjectural emendation, but rather as a scientifically justified restoration of the original. This proposition is characteristic of many contemporary studies, and its theoretical justification is in need of reevaluation. Epigraphic material discovered since the publication of EHO has tended to conform to the general pattern of development described by the authors, but not to their timetable. The very year the book's publication witnessed the successful decipherment of a Hebrew monumental inscription from the end of the 8th century, in which the grapheme Wav was used to indicate the medial vowel U. This is subsequent discoveries make a new examination of the corpus of Hebrew epigraphic materials, a diseratum, whatever that means. So what happened was, what he's saying is that they found a monument inscription from at the end of the 8th century. They were able to decipher it using the Matrix Lectionis. Right? So that's 800 BCE. The basic contention of Cross and Freeman can no longer be maintained, to wit that Northwest Semitic orthography indicated only consonants until vowel letters developed in Aramaic orthography around the 10th century and radiated to Moabite and Hebrew a century later. So it's 900. In Ugaritic, a pronominal suffix is first person singular. I is sometimes indicated by the yod. In the orthography, adi, I alone, hatni, my wedding, bali, my lord, and yod in marim, and mayim, and semayim. I guess that's that word, smym. I guess it would be shod, shin, mem, yod, mem. Is most likely a Matrix Lectionis, either for a contracted diphthong e, in which case it represents a historical writing, or for the vowel I, in which case it is a pure Matrix Lectionis. Bilal and Lewiston, 1970, and that's where they got that from. Bilal Lewiston book, 1970. Okay, the Che grapheme, at least in the word, I guess that's Shin Resh Che, indicates tens in numbers between 10 and 20 is a Matrix Lectionis for E, while in the vocable KWT, the grapheme Wav may be a Matrix Lectionis for U. The second non-entity metallurgical Aleph in MRIA cannot indicate the glottal stop with its inherent vowel. In each of these words, the second Aleph sign must mark a pure vowel, that of the accusative case with the nouns, and of the indicative mood with the verb. Okay, so that's where they're saying right there in the Ugaritic. Okay, it was Matrix Lectionis right there. That's what they're showing you right there. These examples do not comprise a highly developed, consistently applied stem of Matrix Lectionis, but they do demonstrate that at Ugarit, the scribes, and Ugarit, the scribes could and did employ graphemes, which usually indicated consonants to indicate vowels. The Ugaritic data are relevant to the following discussions of first millennium orthography insofar as they demonstrate that an idea of Matrix Lectionis was current in the Canaanite cultural millennium prior to the end of the second millennium. There was not enough evidence to support the definitive statement concerning the influence of this development in Ugaritic cuneiform on the chronological later linear alphabets. Despite this, the reduced Ugaritic alphabet, approximating the Hebrew Phoenician phonemic inventory, mirror written from right to left like Hebrew, Phoenician, and Aramaic, may have been a mediating influence. Texts in the reduced alphabet have been discovered in Ugarit itself, at Tanakh, at Mount Tabor, Beth Shemesh, and Beth Shemesh. Such diverse find spots attest to the wide dissemination of the reduced alphabet in Syria-Palestine. The texts themselves indicate that people speaking dialects akin to Hebrew or Phoenician employed an Ugaritic cuneiform as their alphabet. It may be assumed, though it cannot yet be proven, that the scribes who used the reduced alphabet were also familiar with the manner in which the standard Ugaritic orthography used matrix Lectionis, and were influenced by this usage when they switched to the linear alphabet. Aramaic inscriptions contemporaneous with the Hebrew inscriptions evaluated below do employ a well-defined, if inconsistently applied system of matrix Lectionis. The archaic inscriptions from Zingerli, which are to be dated between the first and last quarters of the 8th century, 770 to 730 BCE, employ Aleph, He, Vav, and Yod as matrix Lectionis in final positions indicating long vowels. Chav and Yod were used as matrix Lectionis to indicate long vowels in medial positions, which were either naturally long or which had emerged as the result of a contracted diphthong. In Old Aramaic, inscriptions from the 8th century with the same situation prevails, while Yod as a matrix Lectionis for a final I is already found in the 10th and 9th century Tel Halaf inscription of the word Z, which would be ZY. Nothing definitive can be said yet concerning the time and place of the introduction of matrix Lectionis into Aramaic orthography or the nature of the dissemination. The geographical and chronological dispersion of the data, the troublesome question of local dialect variations in independent political entities, and the paucity of inscriptions preclude such a statement. Even in Phoenician itself, the bastion of orthographic conservatism, there are sporadic indications that some matrix Lectionis were employed after the 9th century. The word for head is spelled historically with an aleph in the Kilamua inscription from circa 825 BCE, where it must be considered a matrix Lectionis for O. On the 7th century incantation plaque from Arsan Tash, the final Che in Samaneh, I guess Shin Mem Nun Che 8 is a matrix Lectionis for I. So Semena actually would be here. However, Aramaic practice may have influenced the orthographic as it influenced the paleography. The script is typically Aramaic. The evidence for matrix Lectionis, or rather the lack of evidence, permits the statement that no system for representing vowel in orthography appears to have developed in Phoenician. Underlying the emergence of any system of matrix Lectionis is the awareness that graphemes may be assigned more than one value, i.e., that they may be polyphonious. Both the Ugaritic and Phoenician alphabets were originally basically phonemic, each grapheme corresponding to a single consonantal phoneme. Conservative orthographic practices, which did not keep pace with certain sound changes, gave rise to situations in which graphemes assumed more than one value. In both Ugaritic and Phoenician, scribes employing this insight experimented with using such graphemes as vocalic phonemes in positions where they could be no danger of mistaking them for consonants. Example of final vowel. Where historical circumstances did not give rise to enough suitable polyphonious graphemes, scribes could invent new ones, as in the case of the three aleph signs of Ugaritic, A, I, U, and U. Or they could assign a second value to a given grapheme in certain positions within the word. The employment of aleph signs in Ugaritic and of Che in Ugaritic and Phoenician as matrix Lectionis may be due to such an arbitrary establishment of scribal convention. What took so long for the scribes of Ugaritic and Phoenician to realize was apparently obvious to the speakers of Greek and Aramaic, who borrowed the Phoenician alphabet. The earliest attested Greek alphabets appear to have been borrowed by the beginning of the 8th century. Although the relative uniformity of modifications to the Phoenician system necessitated by the demands of the Greek phonology indeed suggests an earlier date. All right. And I want to scroll down here to page 6. I want to show y'all this right here. Right. It says whether or not the Gezer calendar of the 10th century BCE, the oldest comprehensive Hebrew inscription, contains a matrix Lectionis, remains disputed. Discussion centers on the status of the final Vav and in Yud He Vahe, which occurs 4 times. Argue that the Vav is consonantal, representing a third masculine singular suffix attached to a dual noun and is to be pronounced ew, which is, and that word is not Yud He Vahe, is YRHW. That the orthography of the calendars is completely defective and that it is representative of Hebrew scribal practices through the 10th century. Other interpretations, however, are possible. It could be taken as an archaic nominative dual construct, O or A, or as an archaic nominative plural construct, U. Each of these suggestions is open to serious criticism, which undermines any historical reconstruction of the use of metrics Lectionis in Hebrew orthography, which relies on it. It is therefore discreet to assume that the calendar is Hebrew and that its orthography is defective without, however, opting for one of the other problematic solutions. Should latter research establish that the Vav is in fact a matrix Lectionis, it will be necessary to conclude that the emergence of matrix Lectionis in Hebrew, if that is indeed the language of the inscription, parallel chronologically the same development in Aramaic. On the basis of their assumptions about the Gezer calendar, Cross and Freeman conclude: since the system of metrics Lectionis was not used in Hebrew before the 9th century, and since that system is substantially the same as the one used in Aramaic from the beginning of that century, if not earlier, and in Moabite from the middle of the 9th century at the latest, it can hardly be doubted that this system was borrowed by the Israelites from the Arameans during the course of the 9th century BCE. So that's First Temple times, okay? That's King David, and that is King Solomon building the temple, okay? Or at least King Solomon, maybe the end of King David's life. And I think I have a picture of Matrix Lectionis from back in that day. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see here. Let's type in. Let's go to the photos. There we go, right there. You see that book right there is there as well. But this is a picture of Matrix Lectionis right here. Okay, you see that right there, marking the vowel, the lamed right there. See that lamed marking the Matrix Lectionis, but it's a marker right there. The marker right there. Okay. See the vav or the yod right there. So the yod can be an I or E. You know what I'm saying? So it could be the A. You know what I'm saying? And this is right here is the Matrix Lectionis. Okay, and one of the scribal. All right, and so when you go to look at things like this right here, which is the Dead Sea Scroll, okay, and you pull these things up, right, and you're looking at these things and you seeing, and it's like, okay, that's it has is that a yod or a vav right there? If it is, in which really this is a vav, this is a yod. So, yod chet mem, you know what I mean? So, is this the I? Is this a Latin? Is this right here a vav right here, or is this right here a bet? Is this Bethlehem? Is this Bethlehem right here? Is this Bethlehem? Bethlehem? Or is this a vav right here? You guys gotta look at it and see. But consonants made, okay. This word right here is ashur. You have the ayish, They have the ayin, the shin, and the resh. Sure. Wetashur. You know what I'm saying? This is a vibe right here, conjunctive vibe right here. So these are different things. This is what I'm saying. Like, consonants making the vowels, etc. As far as the Dead Sea Scrolls, you can go to anything else. You can go to another one, and it's going to show you like, let's see. Let's go to Qumran K4. Let's look at some papyrus. Look at more complex. And so you gotta remember in different periods right here. I guess this would be a ayin tet vav kuf, maybe. Let me see if we can find something better than. Oh, that's Hellenistic Roman period. We don't want that. Let's go to that. From the Hasmonean period. So you would need to read, learn the middle or the late, actually the I think it's the middle or early Hebrew, because you can see some of these letters, like you see this right here, like it wouldn't be it's not a zade. It could be a zade. But in the different scripts, this right here would be a B, would be the bet in the early Hebrew. And I'm just looking at it the way that the curve right here. Like this word right here, I don't know if this is Weishamar. I mean Weishur. I don't know if this is a Vav or the Yashur. It could be Yashur, Weishur, etc. You got the Khe. Khe. And that's a tet right there. Khe. That's a mem. So yeah, I mean, you gotta learn the different what's the name. So that is the Matrix Lectionis right here, older, and we will get back to this. These conclusions do not necessarily follow from the assumptions made about the Gezer calendar. Among speakers of both Hebrew and Aramaic, the adoption of the orthographic system employing polyphonious graphemes may have given rise independently or in conjunction with the mediation of the reduced Ugaritic cuneiform, to use the notion of Matrix Lectionis. This does not deny the possibility or even the likelihood of Aramaic influence on Israelite scribes, but it precludes the necessity of tracing the use of Matrix Lectionis in Hebrew to developments in Aramaic orthography. In an extensive review of the data available through 1961, L.A. Baines concludes that Matrix Lectionis first appeared at about the beginning of the 6th century BCE as a result of historical spelling. Bain suggests that there were 3 periods in the linguistic evolution of Northwest Semitic languages and 3 corresponding stages in the orthography. The first period extended from the beginning of the use of consonantal alphabetic script to the 10th century. It was characterized by the use of yod and vav only as full consonants if they were followed by a vowel, but by their omissions if they were not followed by a vowel. The second period extended from the end of the 10th to the end of the 7th century as Yahudic, Moabite, Aramaic, and Hebrew. It was characterized by what Baines called semi-consonantal orthography, in which He, Vav, and Yod indicated off-glides and accented long open syllables, while Aleph, the glottal stop, did so in short accented open syllables. Alright, and so I think that'll be all that we read right here. So I think y'all get the point, okay? And again, this book is called Lectionis in Hebrew Epipigraphs. Okay? So for all of them talking about, oh, the Hebrew didn't have no vowels. This right here proves wrong. If you got through this video, then you'll understand, okay? So now I appreciate you if you got through this video. That means you're serious about learning this and serious about learning what the Most High is saying in this Torah in the context. And so until the next video, I do bid you shalom, shalom.
Sing unto Yahweh a new song. Sing unto Yahweh, let all the earth call. Bless his name and show forth his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory amongst the heathens and wonder amongst the people. Every morning and evening I give him praise. The false gods are vain by the Most High. The skies was made, nothing new under the sun. Yeah, these times don't change. I guide my steps, direct and devise my ways. Honor and majesty my Yah retain. Beauty is in the sanctuary amongst the saints. Give Yah glory and strength. Search far and wide across the 7 seas for a sign but never seen a God alive like Yah, my Elohim.